Slava Jesus Christu, this is Dobrotica Erin, and I am making this video because one of the biggest concerns I heard when we announced that we were being transferred back to Alberta was, how are we going to make our butter rams? Or, hey, you promised me we would make a butter ram and we never got to do it, so how are we going to do it? So I thought it would be really fun to make a video while I was making my own, in the hopes that those of you that are interested in either learning how, if you never did do it with me, or for those of you that did it with me the past few years and wanted to carry on the tradition, you would be able to do so. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to act as if you've never done it before, and so I'm going to be walking you through step by step and explaining all of the different materials that I need. So what you're going to need to do this is a block of butter, whatever your preference is. I actually like to have 2 blocks of butter. I keep one in the fridge. It should be able to, you should be able to get by with just 1 block, but inevitably some years my ram ends up bigger than other years, and I find that I'd rather have a little too much than run out partway through my ram. So you need a block of butter, a knife, a ramekin or a small dish that you're going to put your butter ram into, some wooden skewers, preferably with a pointy end, some toothpicks, and the most important part is a garlic press. I haven't used a garlic press that hasn't worked before, and I've used different types, so whatever type of garlic press you have at home is probably going to function, and that is the secret to making the ram's curls and the ram's wool. And one of the other things you'll need, but we're not going to need it till the very end, are some whole cloves, and those are going to be used for the eyes, so as long as you've got those on hand. So once you've got all your materials, I also like to put down a piece of parchment paper or wax paper. This is a messy process, so when you decide you're going to actually sit down and do this, make sure that you've got half an hour or an hour, to include cleanup time, that you're not going to have to touch anything, run after any children, because for those of you that have done this before, you know it's a messy process. Paper towels on standby is always a good idea, an apron, that sort of thing. As for your butter, don't leave it out ahead of time. It's going to soften up really quickly the more we work with it with our hands, so straight out of the fridge is actually better than leaving it out. As it is, we may have to put our ram into the fridge to harden it up a little bit, or flash freeze it in the freezer if you find it's getting a little bit soft and you need it to harden up a bit. So other than that, this isn't going to be like a cooking show where I'm going to do a little bit and then pull out another one that I have off to the side. I'm going to do this start to finish. So if you've done it before and you know what I'm doing, you could skip ahead. Otherwise, turn on the video, get your supplies, and you should be able to do this right along with me. So grab your butter. Open it up. And the first thing we need to do is make a little bit of a base in your dish so that your ram is sitting up a little bit. If you don't put anything at all in your dish, then your ram will be sitting way down in the bottom, and that's where all of his nice curls and wool is supposed to be. So you don't want him sitting too far in the dish. So you're going to start by just cutting a wedge of butter, and then you're just going to have to kind of trim it to fit, and then you're just going to shove it in there. Keep all these little pieces, those are going to be good for later. The flatter the better. You want a nice flat surface for it to work on. So I've used these dishes many times, so I kind of knew how much I needed to cut off. So you'll just have to play your dish by ear. If you find that you cut too much off and it's a little bit wobbly, just take one of the pieces that you've cut off and shove it back down because you don't want your ram wobbling. You don't want him to fall over once we start. So pack your bottom nice and flat. Then you're going to grab your block of butter again, and this is the hardest part, is we need to visualize the ram. And for those of you that have done this with me, you know that throughout the process I just kind of said, just trust me, this is what we're aiming towards here. And once we got past a certain point, it's like a light bulb went off and you all realized where we were heading. But for a little while here, you just kind of have to work with it. It might be good to watch this video and then you'll see where I'm going with something, and then you can go back and do it yourself. But we're going to take probably half of this block of what you've got left, depending on how much you had to cut off. This is why we don't want to use too big of a dish, because then you'll need a pound of butter just to pack the bottom. And this is going to begin to be the body and the head of your ram. So I'm just kind of figuring out here how best it's going to sit on here. I'm going to add his head. So I think I'm going to have it sit kind of up here. Again, now it's hanging off on the edges here. I'm going to need to trim it. So this kind of area here is going to be his chest. This is going to be his bum. So those can be a little bit wider. And I'll just trim off some of the bottom. All these little cuts here can be pretty rough because we're going to cover all this up with the curls. So once you kind of get it fitting in the bottom, we want to round it out. So as I said, I'm going to make this back part his bum. This is where a few of you before are kind of like, what do you mean his bum? What are you talking about? But we're trying to round it out. Okay, so again, it doesn't need to be perfect. You're not going to see any of this at the end. But just because you're not going to see it, that sort of main shape underneath is going to dictate the shape of the curls and the shape of the ram. So if you've got a very blocky body, even if you've got lots of nice curls on him after, if you've got a blocky body, then you're going to have a blocky ram in the end. So I'm hoping you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I've got my camera at an angle so that you can see down, but as a result I can't really see very well what the video is doing. So I'm hoping you're kind of seeing as I'm going. So you can see I kind of rounded out his bum here. I'm going to be adding his head here shortly, and it's always a little bit different. There's not really a formula, so you know, I say that each year I'm going to do it the same, and then inevitably I always end up putting the head on a little bit differently because I kind of forget, or you know, it's the nature of the process. So I'm just kind of, as I said, I'm kind of rounding this out. We'll use our finger in a minute to also help smooth that out. So that's going to be his bum. Now I'm going to be sticking his head up here, and I'm going to be using part of this other block that we've got sitting here. So I'm actually going to cut a chunk of this away at a bit of an angle to put his head on. And again, save all of these pieces and don't smush them either, because one, they're the perfect size, at least to fit into my garlic press, and two, your ram is going to need a nose, and you'll see in a minute that some of those corners work really well for a nose. So again, we're just going to round some of that out. So now I've got the base, which I'm going to put the head on. So now with this other block that we've got left, we need to have a head and horns. So you don't need to worry about the face. We're going to add that on. So if I were to put this on like this, you'd say, whoa, that's a little bit too big. I'm going to cut a little bit off the bottom. Now take a look. That's a little bit better height-wise, a little bit thick front to back-wise. So I'm going to cut some more pieces off. So here we go, like this. This is going to be, we'll get into his face here. So now he needs both horns and a chin. So I'm going to do this flat and hoping you kind of see what I'm doing here. Put towards you. So on the very top here, I'm going to cut a V. And this is kind of the space between the horns. So these two areas here are going to be the horns. So kind of envisioning a circle here. And again, don't be too worried about this part of the process, because we're going to smooth it out and we're going to cover up a lot of it with the furls. So there, that's his chin now. See how we've got kind of this shape happening. He's got his chin kind of up a bit like a lion. That's because I've got such a hard angle on here. So that's just how it happens to be this year, but you know, whatever works for you. It's kind of nice to have his chin up a little bit, then he's looking up at everybody out of your Easter basket and people can kind of see what it is that you've created. So again, I'm kind of rounding him out here. And again, you don't need to worry about his nose. We're going to stick that on momentarily here. Curve all that out like so. Now before you attach this to your ram, I would take your toothpick, you can use your knife too if you want, and you're going to scratch up a whole bunch that angle that we created, and then likewise the back of your ram. And this really is going to help them stick together because you don't really want him falling, his head falling off. Alright, and then you're just going to stick the two together and give a little rub, or a little twist, and there. That's on there pretty good actually. You can see it's not going in. Okay, so this is what we're kind of dealing with all the way around at this point. Now again, he seems to be facing a little bit forward compared to what I'm used to, so I'm just going to slide his whole body back a little bit so he's centered on my dish. Again, you just kind of have to work with the shape you're getting. Now before we do anything else as well, I'm going to add his nose on. So I'm going to go through my pieces here and just have to find one that works. I think this first one I had is probably the best. So you'll see if I decide I'm going to stick that on there, then he'll end up with a bit of a nose, right? So again, I'm going to scratch where I'm going to put him. And then stick his nose on there. And that was just one of the corners that I had from before. And then you can smooth that out. And now that you'll notice your butter's softening up a little bit, you can smooth out that nose, just the shape. Now I'm also going to, before I get too many curls on this guy, make it hard to work with, and just again smoothing out. These are his horns now. Try not to play with this butter that you're taking off too much, because again, the harder the better. You could put it in the fridge, but it saves time if you don't have to be walking to and from the fridge. So just smoothing out the corners, cutting off the corners, because again, we don't want him to have square horns. We want these to be kind of two ball shapes on the side of his head. And I'll turn him around in a minute so you can see what I'm doing. And then the best thing, once you get those corners kind of taken off, I find the easiest thing, rather than trying to eyeball cutting, is just use your hands and really work it off. Now keep in mind, you've attached this head, so you do have to be a little bit careful. It's going to be on there pretty good, but push too hard in the right direction, it will come off. So, and the horns are one of the few parts that aren't going to get covered by his wool. We are going to carve into them a little bit, but generally speaking, they're not going to be covered in any kind of way. So if there was a part that you needed to really fine-tune the most, I guess the horns would be it. We are going to put a little bit of hair in between his horns, so I don't have to worry about the in-between. And I usually put a little bit on his forehead, give him some bangs, but these side parts especially. And you know what, if they're not perfectly round, that's okay. I'll show you right away how mine is doing. Again, it's not going to be perfect. It's not about being perfect. Remember, we're going to eat him anyway. Father Peter always likes to dive right in and take a slice off the face or off the head whenever we go and eat Easter breakfast, because he knows that nobody else likes to eat that part. Nobody else really likes to eat them, period. Sometimes I think too much work went into them, but that's the whole point, is to eat them. So Father Peter finds if he just dives right in and eats the head, then people follow suit and they're not so timid about eating him after that. So just cutting a little bit more off my chin here. Give it a little bit more definition. You have to keep in mind a little bit that once you start putting those curls on, you're going to lose a little bit of your shape, and you're also going to build up a lot. So if you're too timid about taking butter off in this stage, you have a really fat ram later on. So I'm just going to smooth this out now that I've chopped it, and then I will turn him around so that you can see what I'm doing. So there, kind of see I'm smoothing all of this out. I cut off a little bit under here, give him a bit of a chin, make these horns a bit more pronounced. And then, in theory, now would be a good time to carve his horns, but I always like to wait until I've got fur on, or I should say wool. I would call it fur, but I like to wait because I just have usually a better idea of what he's going to look like once I have all that fur on. But you do want to get the main smoothing done, the main roughing, because, as I say, you don't want to have to be sticking your finger all over once you've started. So, hopefully, by now, you've got kind of your basic shape. You've got kind of a bum, his face, his nose, and his horns kind of roughed up. And if you're not here yet, just pause the video, take your time. It's a finicky process, but again, don't stress over this initial part here. You're going to cover up a lot of these rough edges. You can see I have a lot of rough edges still here. You just need the basic form. When you're ready, you're going to grab your garlic press and you're going to grab one of your skewers. Now I find that these work best for getting the curls off the garlic press and then sticking them on to the ram. Your fingers are too thick and then you end up squashing the curls you've already put on, but I find that a skewer, I can keep my hand far enough away, it's sturdy enough that I can get in there and do what I need to do. And then starting with those chunks that you've got, fill up your garlic press. And again, you're trying to work fast because your butter's melting, but if you're working slower, that's fine. Just be aware that you might have to stick even your pieces back in the fridge a little bit. When your butter starts to get really soft, it gets really hard to work with. Even in the freezer, then you're not waiting quite as long. Fill up your garlic press, give it a squeeze, and mine always starts a little bit longer at one end first, so I always have to kind of do this in pieces. Take some off with your skewer, and then start the back so you can kind of see. Just with the skewer, kind of roll them off onto your ram and give them a little press down. Okay, it can be kind of messy. don't want to squash them down completely. Okay, let's give it another little squeeze, or it might take you a few tries to figure out how your garlic press is going to pump them out. Get a rhythm, but once you get them going, you just keep squeezing, keep putting them on, put them all the way around the horns. Now I've done this on top so that you can see what I'm doing, but now I'm going to start moving to the bottom. It's easier to work your way up because you can see what you're doing. Working your way down, then you start ending up having to work around your curls. That can get kind of tricky. So now that you can kind of see what I'm doing, you want to go right down to the dish. That's why we raised him up a little bit. We don't want to see that base that he's on. We just want him to look like he's sitting majestically on top of the dish. And some of these are a little long, and if they're long, again with that skewer, just take them and fold them in. The nice thing about these curls and using this pointy skewer is, as long as you just kind of press and poke, there's no right or wrong way, and they don't get too squashed. Now my garlic press doesn't hold very much butter at a time, so when you run out, just take a few more chunks, put it in. You're going to get a whole bunch of extra melted butter, and I like to try to wipe that off as I go. That's the really soft stuff. And it can kind of get in your way as you go. And you're going to be putting this, we'll be putting these curls almost everywhere, as I said, except for the horns. So that's where all this extra butter that we've got sitting beside us is going to be coming into play. And as I said, that's why I like to have another block on hand in the fridge, because there are times where either I've used a bigger dish or I just haven't cut as much off my initial form as I normally do. And then I get to the curls and I find that I'm actually running low of butter, and you hate to get through 3/4 of the way through and then run out of butter. You're not going to need the whole block. If 2 or 3 of you happen to be doing this together, and how lovely that would be, one spare block between all of you is probably good. As I said, there's a chance you won't even need it, but it's a real pain to need it and not have it. So as you can see, I'm just got my extra pieces here, and I'm just keep filling it up. I kind of try to fill it as full as I can. Get as much as I can out of one pass. Once you get once you get it started initially, I actually find that, you know, the middle of the press, those middle pieces are actually the nicest. So I like to have as much butter in there as I can, so that not stopping and starting a whole bunch. I'm not really used to doing this facing away from me, so I might turn him around here right away. I'm not doing anything different. As I go higher, I'm just scraping it off my press and putting it on. The longer the wild hair, his hair, the better. Give him a little bit of character that way. And again, then you can't see all those marks too if you've got kind of long wild hair. So you can see why I like using this skewer so much. And again, all this extra soft butter that's coming out the sides, because it's been pressed already, it's generally quite soft, and I still save it. Again, I can put it in the fridge at the end, or if I'm really desperate at the very end and you just need a little bit right on top, I don't mind if it's a little bit soft, but for all this initial parts, you kind of want to be working with harder butter. So just keep going all the way around. As I said, just use that point to really poke it in there. It's not going to fall off. You don't need to be worried about that. Unless you try putting it in thin air, obviously. But it doesn't really need to be compacted on there. And you'll notice we didn't scratch the surface of his body for this part because we're not holding anything heavy up. We're not defying gravity here. And because this butter is a little bit softer coming out of this press, it just generally will stick where you need it to, both to the body and to the other hairs that are happening. So I've got some big pieces here, and if you do, just break those up. If your hands are getting messy at this point, as I said, it's good to have paper towels around. If for no other reason your press starts sliding out of your hands. And if you're taking a little bit longer to get to this point, and you find that your butter is really soft for pressing, and you'll notice that it is, it'll still come out as curls like this, but you'll just find that when you go to stick it on, it loses its shape very quickly and gets a little bit mushy. If you find that that's the case, just take all of these pieces, and even your ram for that matter, and just stick them in the freezer for a quick few minutes, or if you need a break, you can stick him in the fridge. He doesn't need to be rock solid. He just needs a little bit of firming up in the fridge. And then you'll find that that makes it a little bit easier. Find I'm working fast, it's due to the fact that I've done this a few times before, and I just, because of that, I know that it's easier for me to work fast than for me to have to cool them off in the in-between. If you're doing this early, like I am, a week and a half to go here, well, I suppose not quite, but a week and a bit till Pascha, you can just put him in the freezer when you're done, and he'll be just fine until Easter. I wouldn't even cover him at first if I were you, because you don't want to squish him. Once he's frozen, you could stick a couple toothpicks in, or you can stick it, I'll stick a couple toothpicks in when I'm done here today. And then that will serve to keep the saran wrap off his body when I do go to transfer him. Come Easter Sunday. There's actually a few people out here in Alberta that they don't make rams for Easter, which generally speaking, a ram isn't traditional. It's really a lamb that would be traditional. Christ being the lamb. The reason I make a ram is because my mom has always liked rams. She collected rams. And one year when I was young, she saw a picture, I think of a lamb, as I say, in a magazine or in a newspaper maybe, and thought, well, I could do that, but I like rams, so I think I'll turn it into a ram. And just became tradition in our house. We always had the Easter ram, and even though I don't have a thing for rams, it just seems like the thing to do. But as I was saying, there's actually a few people out here in Alberta that do make Easter lambs. As a matter of fact, somebody gave me one a couple of weeks ago, and I chuckled because I'm sure she didn't think that there was any chance that I made anything similar. but she definitely has a different technique. I don't think she uses a garlic press. So I'm going to stick the lamb in Noah and Finn's little basket. And I can't help but make my traditional ram. My mom's going to be joining us for Easter this year as well. So you can see I've kind of got it all the way around now, but I like to tuck it up under his chin. Give him a bit of a, I don't want to say a beard, I don't think rams have beards, but his head is up, so I could imagine that he's got a little bit of something under there. And again, you want to hide as much of that roughage, that rough carving that we were doing earlier. You want to hide all that, so don't be afraid to bring it right up under his chin, right in tight around his horns. And also, hoping you can see from where you are, from where I've got it, I always put some in between his horns. Again, you're trying to camouflage that roughage. And I always put a little bit in front. This guy's kind of got wild hair, a bit like Father Peter right now. Give him some bangs, Elvis hair or something. Okay, just kind of so there, I think I've pretty well got that all wrapped in. I still have a little bit of butter to spare, which I don't generally have, but just trying to keep that in mind. And there's always going to be a time at the end here you might think, oh, I need a little bit more somewhere, so it's not bad to have a little bit of butter left over. So now I'm going to work on his horns, and this is why you can see we, generally speaking, did as much of the initial carving beforehand as we did. Still has kind of boxy horns this year, but you know what, that's okay. And then I still use a skewer. I'm going to start a new skewer though. And I am sorry, but I can't really do this to you, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to carve kind of a spiral into his horn, just to give it some definition, and I carve it in the direction that I think a ram horn would be going. So I'm thinking the ram horn turns back first. So if it starts up by his head there, and again I'll show you what I'm doing here once I've done it, but the nature of this process here, I gotta kind of be looking at what I'm doing here. And if we just do this first part quite lightly, if you don't think it looks quite right, after you can smooth it out and start again. So I'm not sure if you can see that. I hope you can. Again, I can't really see what the screen shows, so I'm hoping. And then I take the other, once you've got a curl that you're happy with, and actually I'm going to do the other side while I'm at it. And this, generally I start looking straight on, because I try to make them symmetrical, sort of. Although I suppose rams don't necessarily have symmetrical horns, but you try. So once you've got lines that you are happy with, I take the other end of the skewer, the fat end of the skewer, and I start slowly going back over that line. And I'm scraping off all the butter that I end up with. And what we're doing is we're just making it a more pronounced, more definitive line. I generally will take that tip back and I scrape off those furls. I'm going to use my finger right away. This is a kind of a nitpicky process, and you don't have to be quite as nitpicky about it as I'm being, but I'm self-admittedly a bit of a perfectionist, so it's just how I roll. And I'll show you this here right away, I promise. My butter is getting quite soft now. And I'm tempted to put it back in the fridge, but we are getting near to the end here. So in the interest of not having to break up this lovely video that we're making, I'm just gonna push through and try my best not to touch his little furls, because those are gonna really be affected by the heat. So I'm gonna turn him now, show you, and hopefully you can see that that spiral is a lot more pronounced. And while you're looking at that, I'm going to start on the other one again with the thick side of my skewer. I'm just slowly going back over that line and gradually cutting it in deeper and deeper. And as I go, I'm trying to take off the excess butter and smooth out the furls that I end up leaving behind. I'm going to turn him back to me here right away so that I can see whether or not he's symmetrical, looking the same, and he is, so that's pretty good. And the other thing that now I'm going to do is I'm just going to make kind of the I'm not even sure what they're called, but just some kind of grooves that follow the shape, and I'm just using the pointy end of the skewer for this, and I'm hoping you don't have to go very deep, it's just kind of a detail, hoping you can see that. And that again is just to give him some definition. Rams have those kind of seashell-ish kind of shapes on them. Well, there we go. One's done. Now I don't have any paper towels here, which I told you both. I told you guys that you should have some, and I shamefully did not actually remember to grab any. But so it's a chance to take one last look at his nose. I'm gonna add a little bit more hair. And my butter's really soft now here, so I need to be quite careful what I'm touching and how I go. I can always add a little bit after he's frozen up a bit. And now I'm going to take a handful of cloves and you're going to pick out 2 for the eyes. And when I say pick out 2, again, being the perfectionist that I am, I like them to have kind of a similar size and similar color. And I'm just going to stick those on the front of your ram, wherever you think his eyes ought to be. I'll show you mine some eyes. And the very last thing I'm going to do, just give him 2 little lines down his nose. Again, I'm not really sure why. My mom always did, just to help pronounce his nose a little bit. Make it look like you did something with it. And there is your ram. All ready for Easter. All ready for your basket. Again, if you're going to be freezing him like I am, I would now, while the butter is soft, stick in a few toothpicks around the bottom. You're not going to really notice the holes because of his lovely fur, or sorry, his wool, as I say. But again, you want to stick them in places that are kind of less conspicuous. And that'll just help keep the saran wrap away from him. And you go to transport him. So there you have it, your lovely butter ram. And I do hope that at least a couple of you venture out, give it a try. Natalia, you and I have always done this every year, and I know it's something that I look forward to doing with you. Irena, you did such a nice job last year. I hope you try again this year. Colleen, we never did get to do it together, but maybe you'll take this year as an opportunity to do it. Iris, we were supposed to get together this year with your friend and do it together, but we never got there, so I'm hoping maybe the 2 of you get together and do this. And please feel free to share this video with anyone you think would be interested. And if nothing else, get together, have a good time, get messy, and give it a whirl. So thank you. And if all this video was good for was seeing how I do this, then that's good too. So I wish you the best. We miss you all very much, and we look very forward to seeing you in June. Christmas was good.